There are a few emotions जो बहुत easy होते हैं audience में provoke करने के लिए. These emotions are violence is one of them,
Right.
and is another. These are two emotions which are most easy to provoke. वो directors जो if they are not so talented in creating a story, they depend heavily on violence and to make their films work.
हम लोग बहुत ही हिपोक्रेट लोग हैं. हम सड़कों पे ये गालियाँ एक्सेप्ट कर लेते हैं. सिनेमा में क्योंकि हर बुरा काम सिनेमा करता है. सिनेमा ही आपको बिगाड़ेगा, सिनेमा ही आपको सुधारेगा. ऐसा कुछ नहीं होता है. सिनेमा मेरे हिसाब से आईना है जो आपको दिखलाता है.
I think what's important to address regarding the opening statements, and I think what should be paramount for any creator, is whether the violence or sex is necessary to communicate the story. If not, are you utilizing it as a tool to just create shock value or interest? And how do you defend it when it's unanimously being called out as unnecessary? Lastly, I think it's appropriate to contextualize every scene versus the nature of social media today that out of context clubs movies assuming their intention being the same. Thoda vague hai. Let's discuss specifically. I will always root for something that dares to do something different, and I absolutely hate the dismissive attitude people already have to something as ambitious, eccentric and unique as O Romeo, directed by Vishal Bhardwaj. We had spoken about the teaser and how Vishal Bhardwaj's movie was going to shed light on Hussain Zaidi's work, on how Sapna Didi, played by Tripti Dimri, will take advantage of the animosity and hatred that Ustara, played by Shahid Kapoor, a gangster himself, has for Daud, and they as a duo make sure to sabotage his business and ultimately hope to assassinate him. An extension of what was one of the chapters of Mafia Queens of Mumbai, again written by Hussain Zaidi. And the movie will be set during the early 90s. I can confirm this now because while Shahid Kapoor is killing the goons in a theatre, Anil Kapoor and Madhuri Dixit's sequence from Beta is playing on the big screen. I have come to the conclusion that while everyone picked up on the homage of Vishal Bhardwaj to the 1996 Romeo and Juliet, except me, and how one feels transfixed when they lay their eyes on someone as ethereal or beautiful as Juliet, the film from a vibe POV is What If Kamine was a Shakespearean tragedy? What if I were to present to you a thriller of gangsters set in the Badlands of 90s Mumbai, but also add the element of tragedy where the romantic dynamic between the primary characters is destined to be doomed. This is why I'm intrigued, excited and curious for a movie like O Romeo, because it is a marriage of artistic sensibilities of someone like Vishal Bhardwaj, who has possibly been handed over his biggest budget in his entire career. Even though the case of indie directors being handed over massive projects doesn't really go down well in Hindi cinema, it still produces interesting themes and stories versus the same old extension of new installments of a franchise that we are already tired of. A classic example of this is the picturization of the song sung by Arijit Singh titled Hum To Tere Liye Hi The. By the way, something I speculate, at least partly, is an extension of Ustara's imagination versus reality. A growing fondness between a widow and a gangster is destined to end as a disaster. The life of crime and violence will eventually meet its reality, a sorry, worthless death. But it's the fleeting moments of tenderness of a gangster numb to pointless physical relationships, finally having his heart skip a beat by merely laying his eyes on the woman who stumbled at his doorstep, represented through the fairy tale like background of movement representing bliss, happiness and love that one inherently knows can never be real, but one seeks for the antithesis, for joy, for stillness, even if it just is for a few fleeting moments. This is the marriage of art and commerce I always look forward to, irrespective of the outcome. Let's talk about the good, concerning and contentious issues from the trailer that have become hot topics on social media. I'll start with the good first. I love the scale at which this movie is being presented. It doesn't look like the CGI slop we have accepted with commercial cinema. There is a genuine effort and attention to detail with the locations, frames and production design, and I feel like most people sleep on Vishal Bhardwaj and how consistently beautiful his films have looked across decades. I feel like the evolution of the relationship shared between Shahid Kapoor and Tripti Dimri is going to be like a whirlwind of emotions, and I feel like both the actors are fully capable in investing us in this interesting dynamic. The ability of the ensemble cast just cannot be doubted. Those well versed with Hussain Zaidi's written material on Sapna Didi and Ustara will know what will be the eventual outcome. However, what has been added here, hence the change of the movie title and and even the name of Shahid's character, I think this is for legal purposes, is an exploration of the romance that I believe is being misunderstood by the audience. I'll dwell on this a little later. What I find slightly concerning is the integration of what seems like an item number with Disha Patni, but knowing Vishal Bhardwaj and how he dealt with Bidi Jalaile, I know Disha will have a character of significance versus a character who just randomly appears for the dance piece. On a side note, I will always have double standards if I somehow get to see Shahid dance, and I think the duo of him and Disha on the dance floor is pretty cool to see. This is strictly the dance fan in me talking. I'm sure Bhardwaj will integrate the same well in the screenplay. I'm still lost about the significance of Vikrant Massey and Tamanna's characters, but I'm the most curious about Avinash Tiwari, who looks absolutely yoked in this film. I love some of the frames that I'm seeing of the action set pieces. No one has utilized Shahid Kapoor well in action other than Raj and DK and Farzi. That's a nothing burger of a movie. I just hope Bhardwaj has good musicality to the madness, as the editing pattern of action set pieces to the score in Hindi cinema specifically is still a very evolving art form, something that Tamil and Telugu commercial cinema do really well. I think the cat and mouse chase between Nana Patekar and Shahid Kapoor will be one of the highlights of the movie, having the same dark, twisted sense of humor always associated with Vishal Bhardwaj movies. Getting to the concerning or contentious, whenever I see the reimagination of the Colosseum, anything that has a gladiator-like sequence, I get nightmares of misfires like Kalank, Samrat Prithviraj and Retro. And this dynamic shared between Shahid and Avinash of supposed foes looks interesting, but it may just be too eccentric and wild. You know, the case of anyone like Vishal Bhardwaj, Anurag Kashyap or Dibakar Banerjee is that they take some wild creative swings in the middle of their stories. Some can land and some may just extract confused reactions. I hope this isn't the case of the creative routes just being too wild and my favorite word, zany. I think coming to the most contentious part, which a lot of people I think are misreading, is the violence or toxicity associated with the dialogue Shahid Kapoor is delivering to Tripti. People creating parallels already of how Tripti is being shamed just like an animal she was instructed to lick a shoe. Hear me out. Tripti is a widow desperate for vengeance. The first question Shahid asks is what is she willing to offer, and she says anything. This is a gangster whose first visuals are of murdering people and sleeping with a woman. The association already is of a savage gangster. What is very clear, however, is a deep fondness that Ustara develops for Sapna. Genuinely feelings that are hitting him like a pile of bricks, something he never anticipated. He says, एक बार वो लकीर पार हो गई और अंदर हमेशा के लिए एक हैवान पैदा हो जाता है, insinuating how he changed for life after his first kill. A point of no return in the world of murder and crime. The kapde utar moment is the one everyone is clipping, not realizing that Vishal Bhardwaj is the antithesis of what you assume he will explore. The immediate lines which people are not contextualizing is Tripti saying कि आपको मेरा जिस्म नहीं, मेरी रूह चाहिए, जो इस जन्म में आपको नहीं मिल सकती. Clearly signifying that she will refuse to fall in love with him. If by offering her body, Ustara can be of use to her to kill the man responsible for the murder of her husband, so be it. But she will never let herself fall in love with another man in this life, because her life's purpose is vengeance. What's also clear is that in this particular scene, Ustara puts on the same gangster tough exterior as a front to clearly having fallen in love with Sapna. She might remove her clothes, but he would never be able to get himself to harm her against her will, because again, he's in love with her. This is further confirmed by Nana Patekar mocking him by saying, Majnu bane ghum raha hai, or Farida Jalal frustrated that this girl is so influential ki tere chithde udwa degi. I know there is so much rage bait in cinema right now that people are just clipping everything assuming that it's the new trend, but hear me out. थोड़ा और झांकोगे कि कौन सिनेमा बना रहा है, ये रेज बेट नहीं है. Vishal Bhardwaj is not some ordinary, depends on just sleaze and shock director. Especially with the last frame, I am very interested on how this movie shapes up. Moving on, Rahi Anil Barve is a director whose journey is inundated with hurdles and problems. The director of visionary film Tumbbad has been embroiled in situations where his projects simply are stuck in limbo. I hear crazy stories about the early days of Rahi Anil Barve pitching a movie like Tumbbad, running around with his book of images and text, a vision board of sorts of what Tumbbad should look like. He attempted something extremely ambitious and it took close to a decade for that project to become a reality. A movie whose production designer Nitin Zehani Chaudhary, someone who who also worked in designing the sets of Kalki, spoke to me about this with great unfiltered candor, but it's a bittersweet experience for most creative people who worked on that project because a lot was personally lost in the long journey, consistently assuming that the project will not reach the finish line. Things got so bad for Rahi Anil Barve, the original creator of the film. He now has no rights to the IP of Tumbbad, something Soham Shah has plans to make a franchise with, a plan and idea that is on a different path from what Rahi originally intended. If things couldn't get worse, there are two projects, namely Gulkanda Tales with Prime Video India and Rakt Brahmand with Netflix, that are in limbo for Rahi again. There has been no definitive statement on whether these projects have been shelved or whether we will actually see a particular release date being announced. Speaking of projects being in limbo, and Mayasabha is another project directed by Rahi, which basically had no buyers in the market for years. A movie that has been in the back burner, waiting and begging for anyone to distribute it, and finally someone has. But let's be honest, this will be on a very small scale with limited screens. Rahi on his personal page is urging and requesting people to share the trailer. I don't know about all of you, but I feel a personal connection in at least spreading the word about such a project and creator who is not merely a puppet in the system but wants to consistently express his unique voice through his stories. I genuinely think that Mayasabha will find it extremely tough to be picked up by any streaming platform, or maybe it'll be lapped up after years, like what was the case with a movie like Stolen that benefited from several commercial Bollywood directors backing it. Mayasabha seems like an indie project in its truest sense, integrating elements of horror and a thriller in an abandoned cinema hall where presumably the lead character has dug copious amounts of gold, the catch being he just doesn't remember where it is. Are the motley crew of helpers around him providing him company for how they personally feel about him, or just because they hope for the day where they chance upon such riches? Does the gold even exist? Is the character played by Javed Jafri an unreliable narrator? Is the intention behind the story just to lure humans in his den for his sick ways? What happened to the once acclaimed producer, and why is he a recluse in his rundown cinema? Isn't it fascinating to tap into a mad artist living in isolation, apparently dealing with dementia, of a gold he dug up through all the riches accumulated at the prime of his career? Or is just all of this a figment of his imagination? I have so many questions on what the film will explore. You can be assured the movie will have some absolutely wild ideas, and it's not going to be the regular commercial outing at the movies like we experience week in and week out. I hope it's dark, creepy, scary, and taps into the most shameful human tendencies just like Tumbbad. I hope to see it in theaters and tell you guys more about it. I find it absolutely wild that Javed Jafri also was down to do such an interesting project. De De Pyar De 2 and Mayasabha is quite the range that most actors in Bollywood should aim to emulate. There are multiple reports on Dhurandhar 2 that I'm not particularly a fan of if they are marginally true. I think anyone would be lying to themselves if they said that before the movie hit theaters that they anticipated it to do the business that it did. I'm sure that even the makers were slightly taken aback by the unanimous love the film received. From the little digging that I have done, and something that I have told you about since the inception of this project, is that it was always intended to be a two-part saga just because of the volume of the material they had. Something that could not in any way be condensed into a 3.5-hour feature film. Now what happens with massive success and a rush of monetary riches is that one starts to analyze what worked, what became a passionate topic of discussion, and sadly what should be recreated for recall value. The reason for the success of a movie like Dhurandhar is that while it essentially was the genre of espionage, of Indian spies in conflict with Pakistan, and terrorism that breeds in a system in close connection with their own politicians and the army, it from an aesthetic, action and screenplay POV had its own unique identity versus being a derivative of something that was commercially popular. People liked it because it was the antithesis of what became tiring. So when there are reports of Akshaye Khanna shooting for portions for part 2, or this being a connected universe with Uri, then I believe the makers are falling into the trap that it originally stayed far away from. I want to first explore the first rumor that Akshaye Khanna may be shooting portions for part 2. In a not so ideal scenario, if this is happening simply because Rahman Dakat became such a sensation with the audience and the loyal audience coming in for part 2 would miss the dreaded gangster, then I think the motivation to have his visuals in part 2 is rather disingenuous. Just because Akshay became a social media sensation or a farming on Flipperachi should not warrant a just enough reason to be we have to have flashback sequences of action where he is looking equally cool as part 1. However, what I want to remind all of you is possibly the most chilling scene from part 1, which I believe if they expand on with additional scenes will be spectacular. If you remember the final portion of part 1, how Ranveer was relieved with the fact that there were eyewitnesses who saw him bring the influential gangster back to the hospital, a story that got corroborated with the auto rickshaw driver who was convinced of his performative nature in trying to revive Rahman and bring him to safety. What lingers as Ranveer experiences a sigh of relief with Rahman dying is the image of him staring at him with disdain. A horrifying image of a dead man smoking a cigarette in the corridor of a hospital, alluding to the fact that he will torment Hamza aka Jaskirat till his last breath. This imagery is an extension of what is so skillfully done in the Shakespearean play Macbeth, with Banquo's ghost, how his corpse still tormented Macbeth and consumed him with guilt of what he had just committed. If you remember, this is the precise moment where Piyush Mishra's corpse in Maqbool opens his eyes staring right at Maqbool, something that absolutely terrified Irfan Khan. If the presence of Akshaye Khanna is specifically done to focus on Jaskirat still being tormented by the spirit of Rahman, I think it will be a great dramatic element to shed light on in part 2. If it's just aura farming and looking cool for aesthetic reasons and just because the character became popular, then I believe it will be an extremely lazy and lame approach. The last feature that I really want to shed light on and essentially want to debunk from a historical and practical sense is the case that Jaskirat Singh Rangi, played by Ranveer Singh, is actually the martyred husband of Kirti Koladi's character from Uri the Surgical Strike. The clip that immediately circulated after the release of Dhurandhar is how Ranveer's name reveal as Jaskirat Singh Rangi is the exact name that was said by Kirti Koladi when she was asked about her family by Vicky Kaushal in Uri.
Captain Jaskirat Singh Rangi, seasoned Punjab regiment, Naushera sector के ambush में शहीद हुए थे.
I think this is nothing but a callback, and this connective tissue will not be explored in Dhurandhar Part 2. At least I hope so. Kirti Koladi mentions that her husband was in the Punjab regiment and was martyred in the Naushera sector in an ambush. First of all, of course, Aditya Dhar in 2018 had not envisioned a two-part saga with the same character he casually referenced in Uri. Come on. The reason why I bring this up is that from a chronological and historical standpoint, Uri was based on the attack and operations that took place in 2016. Kirti references the Naushera ambush, some of which have public records of Indian soldiers dying in the mid-2000s, namely 2007, 2009 and in the 2010s, namely 2016 and 2017. Now, of course, if Kirti is referencing that her husband passed away, it has to be before 2016. But if her husband did die in the Naushera ambush in 2007 or 2009, it would logically not make sense because Ranveer posing as Hamza is in Pakistan in this period. The Mumbai attacks having been experienced in the last portion of part 1, making all of us assume that the movie is still set in 2008 and 2009. So the public records of Indian soldiers passing away in the Naushera ambushes and the timeline of Hamza's mission in Dhurandhar in Pakistan will just not align for them to be the same person. Hence, the connection is simply a callback to a name versus what will become an extension of the joint universe we have already seen with Spies and YRF. This is also my pragmatic pitch, hoping that Aditya Dhar does not dive deep into this connected universe and concludes Dhurandhar 2 as was intended. And I say this because I know he wants to do Immortal Ashwathama, as this was a dream that he wanted people to invest in, wanted people to have faith in him, and rather than extending the universe of Dhurandhar, I think most audiences would want to see his beautiful, grand and ambitious project come to life, because you very well know nobody is going to say no to Aditya Dhar post Dhurandhar 2. And that was the video, guys. Write down in the comments below what you thought about the trailers of Romeo and Mayasabha, and what do you think about the rumors of Dhurandhar 2. Please don't forget to follow me on Instagram, the handle's right in front of you. Follow me at JammyPants4. Also, please support us by smashing the like button and subscribing to our channel for weekly content ahead. Thank you for watching.